Hey everybody, welcome back to the Dungeon Dive. Daniel here. Alright, so I'm here with a kind of, I guess you could say, a re-evaluation, another look at revisiting a game that I liked quite a bit, and that is, of course, Darklight Memento Mori. I have been asked a few times over the last year or so if this game is still worth getting, if I still like it, is it still kind of a modern classic of dungeon dives? And that question, I don't want to say it's hard to answer, but maybe it is. It's still a very good game. I know my initial review was super glowing, and maybe my opinion of the game has gone down a little bit. And that's for a couple of reasons. Number one is, unfortunately, Darklight Memento Mori seems to be a dead game. I highly doubt that we will ever see any more official content for this game. And that is kind of a disappointment because I like the game and I would like to see more of it. The thing is this game was very expensive to make. Everything is much larger than in most games. The tiles are huge. The miniatures are large. Even the small, normal-sized minis are big. I mean, this is like a, here's just a normal knight, and here's a space marine from 40K, and it's quite a bit bigger. It's almost 45 millimeter. I guess you could say it's like super heroic 32 millimeter. They're very big minis. Some of the enemies are quite big. The doors that you put onto the map are huge. They're thick. They're good quality. This game, kind of like Space Hulk 4th edition, is kind of a work of art in how some of the components are made. And it ended up being much more expensive than the designers thought. Shipping was a lot more because the box is large and oddly shaped. It's a big square box. And so I think they ended up losing money or not making anything. And unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, depending on how you think of it, the game and the exploration expansion pack are still available on their website. You can get them right now. I just checked as of today. What is it? The 20th or something? September 2020. You can still buy this game with what I consider needed expansion, the exploration pack. With shipping to the United States is about $250, so it's not cheap. I think for Kickstarter, I think we got everything for like $100 or something, which was an insane deal. Maybe it was a little more, but it was super cheap. There's no way they made money. And so anyways, because they haven't made money or they've lost money, and because there are still units available, we're not going to be seeing much more of anything. The designer has said that he is working on something new. It might be in the same world, the same universe, but it's not a sequel. It's probably not going to be compatible. And so, Darklight Memento Mori is probably a dead game. And there's nothing wrong with a dead game. Warhammer Quest is a dead game. But throughout the years, the fans have made and are continuing to make a ton of expansions for that game that are just as good, if not better, than some of the original stuff that Games Workshop made. Okay, will that happen with Darklight Memento Mori? I don't know. I haven't seen that happen yet, but the game is only about a year or two old. It's not an old game yet. So if that happens, well, that could be cool. So maybe you do want to invest in a dead game in hopes that the fans will continue to make cool content for it. Another reason for a reevaluation that may lower my opinion of the game is while playing it, and if you go on to BGG and if you look at the threads there, the forum threads, it almost seems like the game was not fully tested, fully balanced. Balance is a bad word because I actually don't care if a game is balanced or not. But there are, even to this day, I think there are still things that are kind of not up in the air, but still tweaks to be made to the underlying system, to not the core mechanisms that I discussed are still solid, because it is still at its core a Warhammer Quest derivative, same as Shadows of Brimstone. And I think it is probably the best of the Warhammer Quest derivatives. This game does feel like you are playing the original Warhammer Quest in so many ways, including the instant death. I drew this card on the third turn, where you have to the Grim Warden. He's this guy, he's kind of like in control of your souls, and he comes periodically throughout your adventures and demands payment. But this card is just a normal event, and I drew it on my third turn of this game, where one of my heroes, and it was the outcast here, she had to make a charisma test, and I failed. And if I did not have enough souls to pay her, which I didn't, or to pay the Grim Warden, which I didn't because this was at the beginning of the game, I was permanently dead. So 3 turns in, boom, character dead. You know, that kind of stuff just doesn't happen in modern games, modern dungeon crawl games. It does not happen. And it happens here, much like in the original Warhammer Quest. And that is something that fans of those kinds of games, of, you know, Dungeon Quest, Warhammer Quest, Talisman, Advanced Hero Quest, you know, those are things that we like about these kinds of games, is their brutality. So in that sense, this game is super close to Warhammer Quest, and it gives me a lot of that same feeling. And so in that sense, I really do like it. And because it is largely based on those original core mechanics, a lot of them are okay. However, after a while, the designer created a whole bunch of updated monster sheets and hero sheets. He rebalanced the heroes and the monsters because there were some issues. And the rebalanced cards stats are better. And so you want to factor in that with the cost of the game as well, is printing out new cards. So I printed out all of the new monster cards and I laminated them. Now, unfortunately, I didn't do like a double-side print, or didn't put the picture on the back of the old card, of the new cards, like the old cards have, which I also laminated. But there are quite a bit of changes made to the monsters. And one of the main things they changed, let's see if I can find the crawler here in the new cards, is the designer gave each of the monsters a behavior chart that is random. You roll a d6. So here's the new card and here's the original. And so when it's their turn, you roll on this behavior chart, and they can do a couple or a few different things. Some of the stats were modified to mainly nerf some of the enemies, because some of the enemies were really powerful, especially if you were playing solo with one accursed. It was, some of them I think it was almost impossible to actually damage them. So he made a lot of changes to the enemies, which really changes the game quite a bit. You can probably still 100% play with the old, but the new is better. So you're going to want to add, however much money it's going to cost you to print out a whole bunch of these, get them laminated or get them professionally printed. That could cost you anywhere from 10 to 50 bucks more. There's a lot too. Now, he also updated quite a few of the characters. And so here is the new Nephilim, and here's the old Nephilim. As you can see, the new Nephilim has more health, more sanity. The special rules are quite different. He's changed quite a bit of stuff there. Almost all of the characters have more health and sanity in their new iterations. And so that is kind of a bummer to think about, that you can spend a whole bunch of money on a game and still have to spend more to try to get your game balanced and to make it as playable as possible. I just want to make sure I'm not getting the old copies mixed up with the new. Now you still have these cheat sheets, which are okay. Not enough wasn't changed that these original cheat sheets become obsolete, because those are really quite handy. And then also, if you go to BGG, there is this a user made this house rule kind of cheat sheet that incorporates, I can't remember who it was, it's been a long time since I printed and laminated this, but it incorporates a lot of the house rules that I use. You know, they kind of became community standard house rules, and some others, and as well as they updated the boss stats to give a level 0 and a level -1 boss, because starting out, the bosses in this game are super hard at a level 1 accursed. And so they've nerfed some of the bosses to make them more of a fair challenge when you are just starting out the game. So one of the main ways that I play Darklight Memento Mori now is, in the original game, when you tried to make a test, like let's say you were playing as the outcast and you had to make a charisma test, you would roll the number of d6 that your charisma stat says, so in this case 2, and only 6s would count as successes. That is way too difficult. You know, even a game like Arkham Horror, the Arkham File series from FFG, you know, 5s and 6s are successes. So that is kind of an official rule now. I believe the designer has said that can be considered like an official variant. So 5s and 6s count as successes. That makes a lot of the game much more, just more entertaining. This person, they made a couple different changes to how consumables are used, lowered the number of events you have, the journey events when you are traveling. I don't quite use the same as in like the rule that a lot of people use is they half the requirements. I usually just say it's like -1 from whatever the journey is, because the journey can be very brutal, and everybody who's played the game knows that, or has played Warhammer Quest knows that oftentimes the journey to and from a dungeon is far more deadly than the dungeon itself. So lower the number of journey events. When you're playing solo with 1 accursed, you are allowed to still use the healing from the accursed heart after you die. So there's a couple things that the community has gone in and changed to make the game probably a little more palatable to modern gamers, but also to people like me and you and us. You know, it's like sometimes we don't just want a brutally difficult game. Give us a chance to at least make it through 1 or 2 dungeons before our characters die. So definitely, if you're going to buy the game, look for this cheat sheet and punch it out or cut it out, and then you can have you can select if you want to use all of them or not. Another big thing, and I still don't like the way that critical hits are handled in this game. Critical hits are way too deadly in Darklight. Way too deadly. Especially if you're rolling a d6, a 6 is a critical hit. So a 1 in 6 chance that you or the monsters are going to roll a critical hit. And then in the base game, or in the rules as written, critical hits, you don't roll for damage. You take full damage, and on top of that, armor is completely bypassed. So all critical hits are completely piercing, and they do full damage. That is just That's way OP for both cursed and monsters. So what I do is if I rolled a 6 for my to hit, that would be a critical hit. Now let's say I rolled it using this bow here. The damage is 2d6. So what I do for critical hits is I would double the damage roll. So I would roll 4 and then pick the top 2 for the 2d6 damage. So in this case it would be a 9. Add whatever bonuses you have and then you do that much damage, but armor still works. And I just find that to be a much better way to play the game. The house rule on this card is you apply the full amount of armor to critical hits. So I kind of nerf the damage a little bit too. And I just find the game to be more interesting when we play like that. So yeah, so there are some problems that I probably didn't mention in my original review because I was very enamored with this game. And I still am. I still think this is an awesome game. Sometimes when I take this out, when I play it, I do revisit it. I've run it a couple times. I ran it at a Dungeon Synth convention. We played like a kind of a simple, we played like a really basic version because we only had a little bit of time. And everybody I played it with really liked it. It has great table presence. It does take up quite a bit of room. That's another thing. I never use the hero dashboards. I did mount my dashboards onto some cardstock or some heavy mounting board just because they're pretty flimsy. And I like the way this looks better, and it also gives you kind of a tray underneath to hold your cubes. But these just take up way too much room when you have like your skill cards and all of your cards. I just use my standard card holders that I'm always using on the channel for my character sheets. And I also, and since I'm not using the cubes to keep track of health and sanity, I use the trackers from Folklore for using this for life and this for sanity, and these come in really handy. You could also use your ones from Gloomhaven if you have that as well. So yeah, so even though I was super positive about the game, I still think it's pretty good. I still think it's very good. Don't get me wrong. I think it's unfortunate that the game came out not fully tested and that the designer actually spent a lot of time talking to the community on ways to make the game just play better. That is really unfortunate. I think it's unfortunate that we're going to have to, spend more money and time making replacement cards. I guess you could just get the PDF and use it on an iPad or your phone. That's definitely a possibility, but it's just unfortunate that we have to deal with that. But so is the game still worth it? If you had $300, oh, that's another thing, is you need the exploration pack. The exploration pack adds this environmental deck of cards and some additional enemies, including a mimic, which is a must-have in the game, and these spider ladies, and this environmental deck. This deck right here elevates this game to its great status, I think. All dungeon crawls should have something like this, where these just add little details to the rooms that you're going to explore, and traps, and dungeons scatter, and just little things that add character to the dungeon while you are playing the game. A deck like this in Zombicide Black Plague or Zombicide Invader would make those games so much better. And this deck should be in Massive Darkness. Massive Darkness needs something like this. The Cult of Barnacle Bay has a deck like this. And man, so many dungeon crawls forget about the details of these rooms of the character. And with this deck, with this expansion, you have the deck of event cards and you have the deck of environment cards, and these two things together are something that I think really makes Darklight a great game. So in my opinion, you need the exploration pack to have a really special game. I would not recommend buying this game without the exploration pack. So the game with the exploration pack, with shipping, with printing cards, you know, you're looking at like a $300 investment USD to have it shipped here. Is that worth it? I don't know. That's really hard for me to say. I'm not a good consumer advocate, really, because for me, would I spend $300 on this? Let's say me. If I didn't have this and I knew somebody who did, would I feel like maybe my collection was missing something? I guess that depends. If you have Shadows of Brimstone, if you have Warhammer Quest, maybe not. If you don't have those games and you want something like that, you know, are you better off spending $300 on Shadows of Brimstone, which is very much an alive game, too alive, too many damn expansions for that thing, or would you be better off spending $300 and investing that in some old Warhammer Quest stuff and then printing off a lot of the fan-made stuff? So it's just something you're going to have to think about. You know, it's not a cheap game. It is a game that is kind of anachronistic today. Games like this just don't really get made anymore. This kind of really old school dungeon crawl, brutal, dark, with a campaign that you're just struggling to stay alive. You know, Shadows of Brimstone, even though that is also a Warhammer Quest derivative, is quite a bit easier than Warhammer Quest and Darklight. So yeah, is the game worth it? It's still a great game. It needed a little bit of tweaking after it was out. It's expensive, but it's also really, really good, and it's hard to say. You know, the Dungeon Universalis reprint and expansion is hitting Kickstarter soon. So is Machina Arcana. Both of those are amazing modern dungeon crawls. You know, should you get this or two or those? I don't know. That's really up to you. It's up to what you think about the theme. How important is having a game that will probably be expanded more? How important is that to you? Or are you okay with just having this closed game that you can just really invest your time in like this and maybe expand it yourself? So that's it. Just a kind of a long, rambling reevaluation, revisit of Darklight Memento Mori. All right, guys, well, I hope you enjoyed this. Take it easy, and we'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.